All right, what is up, guys? Hope you're having a great day. Let's dive into the charts, shall we? So, Bitcoin, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, we're going to talk about altcoins. We're going to look at some data. There's some new data I found, there's some new features I added or am going to add probably tonight. So, I want to go over that. But mainly, I want to look at some Bitcoin data, like where are we in the cycle, look at some high time frame things, also look at some interesting statistics for Monday P1s. As we know, we don't want to trade against Monday P1s, but I found some statistics where you do want to trade against Monday P1s. We'll get into that, but a good example will be Solana, and just look at the general market overall. So obviously we have the situation where pretty much what we were expecting, right? What we were expecting from here was a retracement and then kind of alts to do their thing. Well, alts are doing the thing. By the way, if you can hear me, let me know, please, because I've had it a couple of times that I streamed to myself for 20 minutes. But altcoins are doing a thing. We're seeing some massive gains, like 25% here on a day, 25% on a day. CRV absolutely killing it. I mean, look at that. Crazy runs. So the first thing I want to say is that this is actually, the market right now is for a lot of assets in hard mode. And this is contrary to common belief. Like easy mode was, especially for Bitcoin, when price was going up a lot, right? Because Bitcoin goes up in a different way than these altcoins are doing right now. Like this was pretty easy to long the retraces. Even here, we went long because there was confirmations. So that was like a, what's up, Eck Group? All right, awesome to hear, loud and clear. Because here there was confirmations, and here there's like clean price section. I just want to say on alts, like if alts look like that, and for example, we're going to look at Ethereum. I think Ethereum is for example, doing the same as what Bitcoin is doing. So it's very well tradable. But these kind of alts, man, like at this point on the lower time frame, pretty untradeable, right? Like you don't want to short this, you don't want to long this. So because for this, it's like you got to get in here and you got to lock in for the ride. But I would not be looking at these alts myself and saying to myself, well, let me see if I can get in on a retrace there, or at least you could get in on the retrace, but that's the thing you want to do, right? So what you, for example, want to do is you have like a fair value gap here, which is mega. I mean, we can dive into this fair value gap for CRV, but personally, I wouldn't like swing long this anymore after such a insane pump already. So my point being is that these kind of moves are actually quite difficult to get in because there's no clear structure to the downside. So the question is, where are you going to get in with a stop loss if you want a long, right? So these alts, I wouldn't pay attention to them. The best thing to do there, so all these with exhausted bulls, you could even, I'd probably even put these at 40, even lower. So everything that's exhausted bull is just like in an absolute, or most likely in an absolute impulsive phase. And you want to be careful with those, right? I would personally focus on Ethereum, Solana, Bitcoin, alts that are moving, but not doing 30% in a day. Those alts are like, if you're in it, great. If not, respect the pump, as we say it. That's my opinion, at least. Okay, so Bitcoin right now, what's the situation? We have still, well, we're clearly forming a range, right? Bitcoin is chopping, and Bitcoin is chopping severely, which is what we expected. As you remember, what I said was that probably we're going to have a chop zone where over-leveraged traders are going to get chopped up. I still don't think we're going to reach 100K just now. We won't reach 100K until Bitcoin dominance starts bouncing, right? And Bitcoin dominance is absolutely falling through the floor. So very nice, well, absolutely falling through the floor. We got to be realistic, right? But it's having a very nice pullback, right? So this is like a mini alt season that we're seeing now. And you can also see, this is alt season, right? How fast we are giving it back. We have this slow grind up. And basically now we've come here and we erased the 133 days of Bitcoin upwards sloping price action for within, what is it? Oops. Within 12 days, so just goes to show how fast that is. So for me, I don't think we're going to break 100K until Bitcoin dominance. We'll see a temporary bounce because I do believe when we hit 100K, that will go through quite rapidly and start going to 103, 106 within no time. And I don't see that happening if Bitcoin dominance is not going up. So for now, we're expecting consolidation on Bitcoin. Then what are we expecting? If you're expecting consolidation, you're looking for range trade. And I want to get into that, but first, a funny thing I saw and already shared in the Discord in case you were around. We have P1 on Monday and we have P2 on Tuesday. So for me personally, I am still eyeing lower for the week. I do think because you have right now the situation still that everyone is very impatient for 100K. Right? You see that with every low, it's like, and I do believe this could be the low to 100K, but here every low is like, okay, 100K, long here, long here. I've seen people long here, right? They're all longing because they're very impatient for 100K. Usually you need kind of that sentiment to reset to a point where people are like, well, maybe it's not going to happen right now. And that's when we will see 100K. And personally, I would be inclined to say that you need a little bit more capitulation in order for that to happen. Now, the current weekly statistics are more or less supportive of that. So we're going to look into that. We have, and this is the thing I want to look into, show you what I mean. Go to the weekly time statistics. So this is very interesting, right? We know for, let me switch to Bitcoin here. We know for Bitcoin, and let me just remove this filter. So these are how many highs and lows are put in on a Monday, right? And I can just filter only on the Monday by doing this. And here you see how many P1s are on Monday. So how many times do we have the weekly high, the weekly low on a Monday? We see that in the last, what I have selected, 25 weeks. I mean, I think normally I have 30 weeks. So if you have the last 30 weeks, then it is 86.2% of the time. Then I noticed something interesting this morning. Because I was like, okay, but what about bearish weeks versus bullish week? Because I can imagine since we're in a bullish uptrend, right, in a bull cycle, that this is more true for when the week is bullish, which means that the weekly low was put in before the weekly high, that we see more weekly lows on Monday than weekly highs, right? And basically what you can do, and I'm just remembering that I have another option for that, but no worry. So if I do less than 0%, just for your sake, what this is showing is bullish weeks. That's all I need to know for now. I won't go into the details. Basically, P1 is below the open. And you can see that the number actually increases, right? Instead of the previous 86%, we're now at 93.3%. I mean, absolutely insane. 93.3% of the last 30 weeks. But this is obviously taking into account bullish and bearish weeks. But since the majority was bullish, or there were a lot bullish, it's still an insane amount. 93.3% of bullish weeks have Monday as P1 in the last 30 weeks, which is completely crazy. So that shows that indeed, it seems that on bullish weeks, likelihood is higher that Monday is going to be P1. If you do the same thing, only then opposite, so we're looking at bearish weeks, then we do see indeed that the probability is lower. It's still high, right? That's why I still think lower is likely, because we're still at 76.9%, which is still, 3 out of 4 weeks, which is a lot, but it's less, right? It's less. And I also saw, for example, the difference very well at Solana. So this is bearish weeks for Solana. I mean, look at this, right? Complete clusterfuck. Doesn't really matter which day it is, to be honest. It's like Monday, Tuesday. Oh, well, this is only, this is highs and lows though. But just to look at this one, we can see that actually a small minority at the moment has Mondays as P1. But basically it's, it's like a coin flip there, and it has been decreasing as well, funnily enough. Whereas if you do bullish weeks, then you see that this trend flips a little bit, right? It's not enormous, but it's enough to say that there's especially here, you see there's a significant difference. So what does that mean? That means that if Monday is, or the weekly high is on Monday, then we don't necessarily want to exclude, or for Solana at least, that doesn't mean that the weekly high is a strong pivot, which is exactly what we saw on Solana. We took it out. which basically, so this kind of move, and we'll dive into it a little bit more later, because I'm going to zoom in on Solana. I think Solana is going to underperform compared to ETH. I have rotated my remainder of my Ethereum or Solana into ETH. I can say a little bit about that later as well. But here we had the Monday high and we took it out. So what we know is that in this environment, this happens more or less, 55, 60% of the time, where price goes down, puts in a P1 later on, and then takes out the weekly high that was put in on Monday. So unlike Bitcoin, this is not a strong pivot, right? At Bitcoin, this would hold 75% of bearish weeks, but on Solana, it is much less. Now, this changes per, let me check, per asset. So for example, we have here Ethereum right there, which is also still on bearish, or this is bullish weeks on 73.3%. So 73% probability of putting in the first weekly pivot on a Monday. And then right here, we have the bearish weeks, which is still quite a lot as well. Actually, more or less the same thing at the moment, 78.6%, right? So for example, for Ethereum at the moment, it doesn't really matter that much. But what I find interesting is that there seems to be seasonality towards it. For example, if you look at, and that becomes especially apparent when I am looking at bullish weeks. So in this case, I'm looking at bullish weeks. And look at the last time we had this massive run up where we saw a lot of bullish P1s, right? Like this really massive run up that ended up way above 80%. It was at the start of 2020, right here, January 6, 2020. And look at where this one started, was also at the start of 2024, which is exactly 4 years later. Rings a bell. We have the 4-year cycle. So this seems to be, and well, we need to gather more data on it. And as time goes on, we will gather more data on it. But so this seems to be a cyclical thing. I will do some more cyclical analysis on this as well, because you also see in between that there is the swings. The main thing I am seeing really is that we have the time intervals between this low, this high, this low, I mean, more or less here, and then this low. If I could draw right now, I could show you, but I can't. But basically the swing seems to be like this, and then here it goes down again, and now it goes up, which means that we are nearing a phase where we're going to go down again. So what I'm going to predict is that we are close to a phase of the cycle where we're going to see less weeks that have a Monday as a weekly high or weekly low. But we're going to see how that goes. But this is very nice. You definitely see the seasonality in this, where you can just see the ebb and flow of the market, which is part of the cycles. I actually want to do much more with this kind of time-based seasonality analysis, because there's a lot to uncover there. I'm gonna uncover more. Anyway, back to Bitcoin. So right now we have the weekly high on Monday. We know the weekly high is a strong pivot, because until the trend shifts, we know that the weekly high is a strong pivot. So this is a strong pivot. The second thing, I already went over it in my last stream, so I'm not gonna go over it too much. I do not believe we're gonna break 100K this week for the reasons that you are probably familiar with. So then we have the following statistics, right? We have Monday SP1, which has more or less a 75% chance of holding in case of bearish weeks, right? So 75% chance of holding. And not only that, we know that 80% of the time we're looking at that weekly P1 in this zone. And again, I went over this at the start of the stream and in yesterday's video, so I'm not going to go into it too much, but we know we're looking for a P1 somewhere here. That means it's pretty unlikely that price is going to do something like this and then go lower, right? It looks very unlikely, because that would mean you have to break 100K, because this zone right here is 100K is well within the P1 80% interval for the week. So what's more likely to happen is that you're going to see downside. So my bias remains unchanged for the week. Yes, I remain bearish locally, like obviously a high time frame. I'm very bullish, but I do still think that the most logical target for this week is here, right? Because we've concluded, statistically speaking, that higher doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Something like this. I mean, only thing I could see happening is this, right? And that would still be a very low probability day week, because we know that this weekly high is most likely to hold. But Bitcoin is in hard mode right now. But in case the weekly high holds, which again is statistically more likely, then we can just look at this and we see that 94.8% of weeks see more displacement between the weekly high and the weekly low, right? So right now, this move right here is 4.8%, and we know that 94%, 95% even of weeks see a bigger move than negative 4.8% if the weekly high gets put in before the weekly low. So if the weekly high holds, there's basically a 95% chance that we must go lower. And what I want to stress that is assuming the weekly high will hold, right? If the weekly high doesn't hold, then the other option is to do something like this, where you basically range and at this displacement. But if that happens, I would expect it to end up before this weekly high. It would basically be a very, very contracted week for Bitcoin, which is very normal in this part of the cycle because we have alt season or mini alt season. So next things, if you will be looking for a short and lower, obviously the way to do it in this environment is ranging trades. This is the environment for ranging trades. And with the new 80% intervals, we can actually do this. So the way we can do it is we have this 80% intervals right here. This is for the week. And I also already mapped them out for the daily 80% ranges. So this is for the day. And this is for the week. Let me just remove this right here. What you basically want to look for is support below the, or let me put it like this. For the day, anywhere here, well, let's say, take it anywhere here is a short zone if the daily high gets put in first, right? So if this happens, then this is the short zone where you want to look for, and you want to target this zone, right? That's the target zone. If the opposite happens, right? So say we go down, and we'll dive into that more. So say this happens, then this is the target zone where you want to look for. Similarly, these are exhaustion zones. If I could draw out where I would look for shorts and longs, this is where I'd look for shorts. This is also where I'd look for shorts, right? But it's just a different kind. Like this would be the short like this, because with 80% certainty, if the daily high is going to be put in, it's going to be here, right? So the short there would be slightly different because you short this and you short it down towards somewhere in this area. And furthermore, if price reaches these levels, then obviously this is the exhausted area, right? So this is an exhausted area. So this is where you would want to look for shorts if price gets there. We can apply the same logic the other way around, right? That this is where you want to look for longs targeting somewhere in this area. Wherever there's a support or demand or supply zone, I would say support resistance, then it's the same thing. And also this is the long area, right? Because usually here, price comes here, you're pretty exhausted. This is exactly what, for example, happened on the week yesterday. Small suggestion. What about this? I just did the cam like this, so you won't have to see me. Mildly gorgeous. There you go. So just screen. I'll fix the camera later. Oh, wait. I think I know how to do it. It's a good suggestion. There we go. Big. I'll just leave it like this for now. I'll figure it out later. So either way, what I'm talking about is that you want to look for, this is exhaustion zones. This is for the day, right? And this is exhaustion zones as well for shorts. So what happened, for example, a really nice one is, or let me take it one step at a time. First, P1 zone, right? We have this on multiple time frames. And if you look, for example, at Solana, right here, then if you remember, and by the way, I don't really trust this pump. I think from PA perspective, it looks very nice. But yesterday you had the ETF news, and the ETF is, man, if you have an ETF pump, a news pump like that, that's a FOMO pump, right? And usually that's not a good sign. So I'm a little bit mistrusting of this pump. As I mentioned, I've rotated my Solana into ETH as well, literally because of that. I was already thinking about it. But anyway, I digress. So if you remember on Monday on the stream, me and Tim were looking at Solana and we're looking for a long. The thing we're looking at first was to take a long here. But basically what my message was, okay, we have to look for longs if it happens somewhere in this zone, right? And there's a little bit of a wiggle room there. So this is not, it's not that this invalidates it, but 80% of the time, the weekly low will be put in more or less in this area if the weekly low becomes P1, that is, right? So if this one would hold, then 80% of the time it would be in this area. So then what you want to do is look for confluence in that area and say, well, obviously look at the general direction. In this case, general direction is up, but I still think there is a case to be made for further downside. But regardless, what you see, for example, here was a very nice order block. Like this is a really good order block. Why? Because it leaves behind a fair value gap here, right? So you have this order block right there. And then we have, and I can just put that on. Well, the fair value gap that's already filled by now, but doesn't matter because the order block wasn't. But this was the fair value gap, right? So order blocks that leave behind fair value gaps are usually really strong. So what you see then is that, okay, we have confluence. So at the start of the week, what we're looking at is, okay, somewhere here or here is where you want to look for that low to be put in if you're going to get a move up. And then you also have that order block right in that zone. So then this is something you want to be looking at, right? This is a zone of interest because we have, hey, it's the good place, right? It's a very good place because 80% of the time the first weekly pivot would be put in somewhere between there. And and then you also have confluence with a very nice order block. So that's how you use that strategy. Robin, how does this strategy using the zones fit with the Asia order blocks acting as support resistance? Does price need to displace a certain percent to make the order block more probable to act as SR? If you're talking about strategy I talked about yesterday, those are not necessarily order blocks. Those are opening ranges. Opening ranges are a little bit different than order blocks. They can be order blocks or they cannot be. But the opening ranges are pretty much just the first 2 hours of price action. And the answer is yes. If you see a displacement, let me show you. So I have them all mapped out. Let me go right here. So just the first 2 hours of the day, every day I have them mapped out here. This was the first 2 hours of yesterday, first 2 hours of today. So today we have a really big opening range because we had a very big displacement on the first 2 hours. And I can make it a little bit easier to spot. With all the daily opens marked out like that. And we'll just close. Let's play that one. So here are all the opening ranges. I haven't marked out this one. I don't mark out the weekends. And I guess I accidentally deleted this one and this one. But regardless, your question is, so it's not really an order block, although it does act as support resistance if the displacement is enough, right? So what I have noticed is that, for example, here, you see a big displacement, price comes back to it and holds it as resistance, right? At least doesn't claim it. Here, yesterday, we had, I would say this was a decent displacement. And then in the end, price did reach above it, but it was only the next day. You can see that it held that day and that it was not able to claim it. So in general speaking, if you see quite a move away from it, then if it returns, you can say with quite some certainty that it's going to hold, but it's not necessarily an order block. The way you do it is you just take the first 2 hours of the day, probably even do the first hour, but I do the first 2 hours. So for example, here you see another one, right? Price moves away, comes back, taps in, goes out. And here price moves away, taps back, goes out. Whereas here, the move above it was rather small, right? This is more of an impulsive move. This is rather a small move. So you can always see that here the same thing, right? The bigger the move away from it, if you get back, the higher the chance of it holding as support or resistance. Because for example, I'm trying to look at a contradictory example. Like for example, here, this is not a good move, right? This is just rotating around that opening range right there. So there's no real displacement there. So yes, the answer is that you do need displacement for that to act out. Like for example, now what we have today, I wouldn't draw any conclusions on it because we have a very big opening range. And you can see prices just rotating around it, right? If we had the same thing, price went here, didn't really cross it. Now it's going back. It's going to visit the other side, and then we'll see what happens. So yes, you do need displacement, but the way to do it is simply to look at the first 2 hours of the day. So right, first hour, second hour, in this case, the second hour of the day was all the price action. So then this is the opening range I mark out. It's not an order block, but the idea, what you're describing, is valid. Yes, you need displacement for it to act as support or resistance. So anyway, back to the topic at hand, since we just discussed the strategy of how to look for longs and shorts in those areas, what we can see now, if we do the same thing, so we have the day, right? And we have the week, by the way. Well, we have that weekly P1 on Monday. Let me just mark that out like this. So with the weekly high here, Monday, whoops. Weekly high. Right, yeah, that's Monday, 2nd of December. So we know this one is likely to hold. We also know that we're ranging. So what I discussed earlier is that you want to look for positions to place yourself in, right? This would have been the best one in case you grabbed it. The second best one, if we would get it, and I'm not sure if I would short this market, to be honest. It is a bull market after all. I think I would rather wait for negative displacement, although I did take a short yesterday, closed a bit here, got stopped out on the rest of break even. Because the statistics are just really, really good for it, right? The Monday P1 is a very strong pivot, so why not use it? But anyway, if you see right now already, we have the range here, so the daily range, the daily P1 range, and look at what's at the edge of the daily P1 range. We have this supply zone right there. We also have the point of control of the range right here, which is always a good level, though it already gave a reaction there. And we have some liquidity there, right? So if price would be able to get there today and do this, then this is a very interesting short area, right? But you'd rather have this happen sooner rather than later. And then this would be a very nice area to look for a short. The earlier the better. The earlier the better. So if this now shoots up to here, and you're still well within the New York session, because we just started the New York session right here. So if this happens in the first 3 hours of the New York session, I would say that would be perfect. And then you would have a chance of a big reversal towards lows. Because we have the confluence between, well, we just have a very good zone of supply. We have the weekly high right above it, which is unlike, 3 out of 4 weeks it will hold. And it is also within that zone for the daily P1 range. And then if we would get that, right, so this would be the best place to look for it. If we would get that today, then you're looking somewhere within this area to put in the low. But, since we're already quite progressed, I personally don't think we'll get it today, but the theory still holds. If it happens tomorrow, obviously also good. The main idea is that you want to look for important support resistance like zones within, in this case, it's the supply zone right there. But you want to look for important support resistance zones in these areas, because whichever gets tapped first is very likely to hold. And then you have that reversal. So say price would have done this, it didn't do it, but say price would have done this. This is the first important point of interest that would have been hit. Then, it's a much higher probability that it's going to hold and lead to a move to the other side. So this is kind of how you want to look at it. And you also see that on, different time frames where you saw the weekly high right here, which was also put in at a point of interest. Which one was it again? Right here. So earlier you heard me say that order blocks that leave behind fair value gaps are very strong. So here's an order block that leaves behind a fair value gap, right? So it's basically any order block that results in a very aggressive move. So here you put in this order block and you have a very aggressive move down. So that order block is very, very important. But I see we already hit it here, by the way. I'm looking at the wrong thing, but I believe we also had one. Yeah, there it is, right there. So I'm looking at the wrong one. This one is not as strong. I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to, sugarcoat it. It's still an order block. Not my favorite one. It did leave behind a little fair value gap, so it's definitely still valid. But this is not nearly as strong as a move as this one, right? So this one was a lot stronger, but still, it held resistance, and which is exact same thing. So we had that weekly open, and then you see that this supply zone is very nicely within the weekly 80% interval range. So that can make you a lot more confident if you head into that on the Monday open, right? So you head into this supply zone on the Monday open, and then we reject. So just going into this on the Monday open, this is clearly resistance. We see that resistance is happening. We have actually downward consolidation. I wouldn't be surprised to see this happening, continuing like that. Actually looks like a nice channel. Let me draw that. But if you see this happening at the start of the week, and you go in this supply zone, you can have much more confidence to take short there and also hold it, right? I would not be surprised to see that happen. Let me actually draw that channel. Wow, that's terribly drawn. Let me see if that makes any sense at all. Yeah, it does make sense. But basically, this was just a massive deviation below that channel. A massive deviation. But it seems to be respected. It's actually where we bounced from, or rejected from today. So what you see right here is just downward consolidation, right? So this fits the narrative where we are looking for downward consolidation, or at least we're looking for consolidation. And I wrote many posts about it, but there's multiple ways price can consolidate. And one of them is downward sloping consolidation, which is basically what you're seeing here, which is also why I think this would make for a really good short opportunity, because the general trend of price seems to be going down right now, right? So it's downward consolidation. And actually, while I'm saying that, I'm getting an idea for statistics that I'm gonna note down after the stream. I think you can actually quantify that. But regardless, you can see how nice of an area this was, because if you're looking for confluence, then you could have already drawn the channel as well at the time, whatever ETA you had there. But regardless, even if we didn't have the channel, this one was pretty obvious, and you have that move into that zone right at the weekly open, right in the weekly 80% range. That's why I want to look for it. All right, so that's the weekly, right? So I'm still looking for lower because of the reasons I mentioned. I still think that makes sense. If the weekly high holds, like I said, there is pretty much a 95% chance we are going to take this out later on in the week. That would surely scare out some people. I do think, I'm personally of the bias that we need a little flush We need a little flush to scare some more people. Once again, I said it earlier, everyone's just longing. Usually it doesn't go well. Usually it only goes up when everyone is shaken out, right? It's pretty much in small what happened here. I don't know if you remember, but back here, I was saying it's the same concept, only this in smaller, because we're not in the same part of the cycle. So I'm not saying this is going to happen. This is not going to happen. If anything, did something like this would be more reasonable, smaller. But the same thing was true, though, like in a smaller scale, what happened here, and this is important to understand sentiment, is that price ramped up for basically 50 days, conditioning everyone to long, right? And that kind of happened now in small as well. We had this really massive move up, but it was only 14 days, so it's not nearly as long. But regardless, everyone was like, okay, let's long. And that's kind of similar as what you're seeing now. Now everyone is saying, okay, let's long to 100K, let's long to 100K. Usually, and I'm saying, when I say usually, most of the time, almost all of the time, that doesn't get rewarded. So for some of you that were around, what I was saying is that at the time, everyone was longing this. And I made a post about it. It's on Twitter in real time where I was explaining why this would not work out. I said, everyone is longing this and everyone is longing this. And the reason I'm saying it is because right now, I think the same thing is happening. My argument was, okay, this is not going to happen. So everyone's looking at this. Everyone's looking to stream or long. Let me check one thing, by the way. Yeah, we got it. All right, but all right, guys. By the way, real quick, can you guys check for me if you can put it in 1080p? Because last time that didn't work. But everyone was looking for this for the long, right? Everyone was looking for this for the long, because everyone was conditioned to be by this stage to be very impatient, right? Because every long worked, everything was going up, so everyone was just long. And at this point, long only mode was over. That's why I posted here. Okay, long only mode is over. You can go to my Twitter, you'll see it. And then what I was saying is, okay, therefore everyone here is going to get stopped out who are trading like this, because what they are thinking is they're impatient and they're like, okay, let's go for the next leg up, even though the environment has changed, right? We're no longer in up only mode. But I remember I was posting it and all I got back was, no, you're wrong. We're still up. We're still trending up. Kind of the same thing. You also see this downward sloping consolidation, right? So what's happening now is basically a small version of this, in my opinion, where you kind of consolidate downwards and everyone is just longing because they are super impatient. And like I said, the reason these people got stopped out is because that is the exact trap that market makers will set. And it's the exact kind of thinking that makes or gets punished by the market. This is also what I said in that initial post where I said, okay, this is the kind that makes you very nice liquidity for market makers, right? So in the end, they did get stopped out and they even got stopped out again in case they long this, until the point where there was a moment where everyone's like, okay, this thing is not going to go up again, which was here, right? Which is more or less the final capitulation. I personally bought here a little bit too early, but still a great entry. This was the final capitulation. But the reason I'm saying all that is because right now, I believe the same thing is going on right here in small, where you see we had this, massive run up. But I want to stress, it's not the same thing. We're not going to see that big of a consolidation. I do not believe it. But we had 16 days of going up, and then we stopped just short of 99 or 100K. And now people are impatient, right? People are impatient and they want to see 100K. It will come, but everyone now is longing this. Well, I personally long this as well. I do think this is like very nice areas to build a swing long position, because I do believe it is going to go past that 100K. But my point being is that everyone right now, for example, believe me, people are long like this. And they're like this. People are long like this. And I swear people are doing this. I've seen people do it. And usually they get stopped out, right? So this is not going to happen. Therefore, we need to stop these people out. we need for the market to return to a more healthy phase, probably to a point where a lot of people are like, oh shit, like this might go down a lot lower like this, and that's also not going to happen. So you want to reach that stage where many people are afraid to long because they think it will go lower, and then it will not go lower, and then will go up, which we have not reached. So downward consolidation, I do think we need to see a little bit of more capitulation. And once again, we have a very nice confluence with weekly statistics that we need to go lower. So I would argue that we need to go a little lower this week. All right, back to the statistics. We have the weekly ranges right there. We have the daily range in between there. Right, so this actually is, all right, wow. Yeah, I haven't seen that channel, but this is actually a very nice area because the same holds, right? We have that daily open right here. Then you go up, you tap this area, and what happens then? So this is within the area you want to see, because if the daily high would come first, it would be 80% of the time in this area right there, which we calculate with the dashboard. And we have this resistance, this downward sloping resistance, and it taps right into that. So it would not be weird at all to say, okay, then price can do this. And what we're looking for, so if this high holds, what we're looking for is a target somewhere here. So it's not even out of the realm of possibilities that we're going for the yesterday's low again. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. And you can do the same thing with the sessions, right? So everything's fractal. So I already put them all in the chart. I'm just gonna delete the delete the weekly. So here in the sessions, it's the same thing. If the session were to reverse and go up, New York, right, and reach this area that we're looking at, then you'd want it to happen, somewhere in here, preferably. But then again, the midline of this downward consolidation comes there, right? So this is obviously the first point of interest that we're looking at to see that happen. So if you get a move down there, didn't mean to do that. We get a move down there, get a bounce, then, that's a nice area as well. If you are short, then this is an even more refined area to look for take profits, because this is the exhaustion zone of the New York session. And usually the New York session goes the furthest, right? You can see that as well. I mean, look at how far the displacement of the New York session is in orange compared to the daily. That's because most of the price action happens during New York session. So we see weakness as expected. I personally think it will go lower, but you know that by now I'm a broken clock. So you know my point now on Bitcoin. So now on to Ethereum and Solana. Let's look at the same things. I think Ethereum looks pretty nice, but remember what I said. We have the daily interval ranges here. And again, you can look at that. In case you don't know, here, just going to 80% intervals. This version actually you don't have access to yet, but I'll probably upload it tonight. Oh, actually, you do have access to it in the test version. Somewhere in the Discord, I will post it. But so you can check them here, right? So basically, I just filled them all in because I didn't want to spend the time. So what I was saying earlier is that, anywhere here is where you're looking for longs to go up for the rest of the day, or at least, to put in the daily high and, maybe do this. But anywhere here is where I personally would be looking for shorts, right? Because that's more an exhaustion zone. Because at this point, and I wouldn't short this, by the way, because I think Ethereum is looking strong. So I wouldn't short Ethereum, but just for the sake of argument, and maybe to fit your strategy. But for the sake of argument, this is more or less the zone where you would do it, right? That's more or less the exhaustion zone, because we know that if price has to go here, that is only 20% of days that would go that high, which is not a lot, right? It's not a lot. Only 20% of days go there, and those are the really big trending days. And the big trending days simply don't occur that often. So is that something you want to bet on? Most of the time you do not. So once again, the same thing goes, right? You look for resistance zones right here in this area, right? So if we just draw a line, I mean, you can, it's not an exact science, but somewhere here, then obviously you have, this S&P would have been really nice, but we front run it. But whatever this, resistance area you can find there is something you want to be on the lookout for. And once again, we can do the same thing with the sessions. So we do this lower, and then we see that the session interval was actually like this. So this setup is actually pretty nice, because what I see, if the session or the day, Asia has already moved up quite a lot, London as well, and then New York opens here. What can we tell from this? We know, so this is the 80% session interval, right, for P1s. This is the 80% session interval for session P2, so New York P2s. Let me get P2 on, for the session intervals on, right there. So, okay, here's the situation, right? New York opened in the exhaustion zone. You see that, in the exhaustion zone for Ethereum. This is in the exhaustion zone for Ethereum, right there. So what does that mean? That means that if we were to have a bullish day, then we're looking for targets somewhere in here, or a bullish New York session, sorry. We're looking for a target somewhere in here, which would pretty quickly place it outside of the daily P2 interval, which means that, this is only going to happen, like far beyond this, is only going to happen if price is really, really going to trend. So if something like this happens, right? Which in this case could happen for Ethereum. I'm not saying I would short this. I'm just saying that in general, it makes sense to look at this. If something is really, really hard, bigly trending up, I would not trade against that. I personally would not trade against that. But in general, this is what you were looking for. So, it would have been nicer if price had done this, retraced a little bit, and then look for an entry here. Because then the daily high, so if you then long the 80% interval range for P2s, so we know that 80% of price action is going to end up in this box, right? So if we would have come from a lower place, there is much more room to go up without exhausting the price. That's what I'm saying. So in this case, you do the opposite. So if this happens, actually it could be a nice strategy if you reach a resistance zone in that exhaustion area, and that's a nice place to look for shorts. And right now, I mean, let's check what the current session is doing, but it looks like we're having a little bearish session on our hands. Let's look at statistics. This one is still undecided, could still go up. Right? Again, I would not short Ethereum. I think actually Ethereum is pretty strong. But maybe look at shorts on Solana. Let's dive into that a little later. Because you also see that right now the weekly, like this is just really nice price action, right? This is the area we were looking at start of the week. We have this liquidity right there. We had this fair value gap actually here as well that we now fully filled, or almost fully filled. It's still open actually. But we go down, we take that, and price reversed up. It actually hasn't taken the Monday high yet. Has it? Ooh. That actually makes it a much more higher confluence zone. So yes, I am bullish on ETH, but these are the kind of levels you would be, like there's a lot of confluences for a short. Because if you remember on ETH, yeah, and this is what I want to see. So a little bit of a mixed bag. We see the usual suspects at the moment doing well, but we also see quite some alts having a bearish session. It's really fun to see that it's kind of around a mixed bag these days. So some alts are doing well, some are not. But we have quite some alts doing not so well. Ethereum, yeah, like I thought, undecided, actually still has quite some, could see further upside, strong bull signs. And I'm interested in Solana as well, which is bearish and strong bearish on the 4-hour. But as you might remember, if you go for Ethereum here, And we know that, more or less 75% of weeks have a P1 on Monday, right? So a weekly high on Monday. And look at where that weekly high is, right there. Now, in this case, I would not bet on that. I would personally not bet on it because you have just the perfect price action here. We're priced at this, sweep the lows. It's at a nice area. It's more or less around the place where you want to see it. And in general, Ethereum just looks very bullish, right? I mean, look at this. So I wouldn't do it. But if an asset would be showing more weakness, you could look into it. But this looks like a very, very clean setup so far where you could try to go for this. Plus, you have the current day. My rule of thumb is that I never short against a strong bull signal. Plus, it's the bull market. But if you go to the summary page, and we would just look at the big caps right now, ETH and Solana. Now you see what I mean. So say you would be looking for a short here because you're like, well, the weekly high is there. We have that exhaustion zone here. And we have to, once again, I want to emphasize that here we will only come today if there's a strong trending day. But if in any environment it's going to happen, it's during alt season, right? So I personally, think the probability is a little bit higher. But also we have this very nice low right here. And we know that if the weekly low is going to hold, and in terms of, price action, it looks like very well like it might, that we know we're looking somewhere here for a target for the week. Oh, that's really high, but somewhere here, I would say, not at the top. So, higher seems likely. But so say you're looking to short, I would personally not want to see this, a strong bull sign. That's just for me. If I'm looking for a short, I don't want to see strong bull here. I don't want to see strong bull here. It's not the thing I am looking at. That for me is a red flag. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to stay out. So that's Ethereum. So basically for Ethereum, I don't think there's any trade right now. I think it looks like price wants to go higher. The long was here, which is actually really nice because this is what Tim and me were looking at the start of the week. I mean, we were looking at this one, but in the end, you have a nice PO3 actually going in there. So I think it's PO3. I'm not very good with the names. But that was very nice. And then finally, Sol, we were looking at the same thing. The Sol actually, in terms of PA, is even cleaner. But once again, I think it will do worse. So what happened here for Sol is exactly the same thing, right? I mentioned this at the start of the stream. We had this order block right here, this very potent order block, because it left behind a fair value gap. So that's what you want to see. That is what you want to see. And then what happens is that you are looking at the start of the week, which was Tim and me were doing, okay, we're looking at the start of the week, okay, where, if the weekly low is going to be put in first, right, if you're going to see continuation, I want to add text, if you want to see continuation, then you're looking somewhere here, right, where you put in a low like this and then go up. So then you find for confluences, you find this amazing, also this liquidity, but this amazing order block. And you're like, well, if that price hits, that's a very, very good spot to hit it. Still, though, the reason why I'm not very excited about this one is because we had that ETF news yesterday. So I don't know if you know, but yesterday here, news came out that the Solana ETF is being filed by BlackRock, I think. And then we got that pump. So those are pumps I do not trust. I do not trust ETF pumps. I don't know if you guys remember what happened to ETH after the ETF news. I'll show you. So the ETF news for ETH was here. And in my opinion, that would have been a much better position to have actually, how do you call it? To actually have a bottom, because we were at a high time frame bottom, which I mean, we're still massively trending down. Solana is arguably still trending up against ETH. But anyway, here was the ETF news. price shot up, and then what happened after, right? Price just died down. Because this was also a typical buy the rumor, sell the news event, or at least everyone was FOMOing in here, and then other people were once again offloading their bags on it. So I do believe there is more or less a rotation going on in Solana right now towards ETH. I think Solana had a great run compared to ETH, but now it's ETH time. So you already see this break here, right? We had some break right there of structure, small break, but a break nonetheless here as well. So it's looking weak. And then I had this as an important support resistance line mapped out. And then you see the ETF news being that comes out here. And then you see that pump and then a rejection from that support resistance zone after breaking some market structure. Yeah, then that was my cue to say, okay, I'm gonna get out, which is also why I am less confident this will hold, because we have to understand that yesterday, let me put it like this. This is still a very good zone to put in a weekly P1. It's still a very good zone for a weekly P1. So yes, what I'm saying is that there is still a decent chance this will happen, and you're looking for a weekly low somewhere in here. Because if you might remember that Tim and me were actually looking for lower at Monday stream, and one could argue that this was just a news pump. And if it's just purely a news pump, then these are usually going to get faded in the next days, which is what you're seeing now, right? News pumps usually don't last. It's a complete FOMO pump. Everyone's FOMOing in. Usually not a good idea. So then price reverses, because we were looking at lower levels for some demand to be filled. If price gets there, I don't know if like that. I mean, that would, it will not come this low. I do not see it come this low. Let me see what part. I mean, anywhere in this area looks like a very nice zone. Because let's see where the previous resistance was. I think we actually tapped that right there. Oh yeah, here. This is a zone I would look at. That looks like a good zone. So if price would go further down, and the reason why I'm saying is that looks like a good zone, because this is obviously the resistance we put in here. And this is also how I use it, right? So I know this 80% intervals are right there. Oh, actually. Are here. So if we go down further, then you're looking for a weekly low to be put in somewhere here. And what you can see with Solana, which brings me to the next thing, is that very simply put, this box is smaller than this box, which means bearish weeks are less bearish than bullish weeks are bullish, right? Bearish weeks are small for Solana. And I've integrated that into the new system right here through the P2 interval ratio. So what basically this is showing, if I can find Sol right there. Oh wait, this is the daily. Basically, the higher this is, the more bias there is for upside, in this case on the day, right? So this is basically showing that the bullish days are 50% more bullish than bearish days are bearish. And if it's negative, then basically we're seeing more negative. So YFI is performing very bad on a daily basis. We're seeing a lot more bearish displacement than bullish displacement. And SUI is doing very well, and Floki is also doing very well on a daily basis, right? But we can do this on multiple time frames. So if you do that on the weekly, for example, what you will see in Solana is basically a positive ratio, because if this is bigger than this, the bigger the difference, pretty much, the bigger the ratio. Because it means that, because you're looking for targets in here, and I will get back to this, because I do think there's a good case to be made that we're just going to go down. I'm going to get back to that. But look at TRB, for example, like crazy, 2.7. 2.7 is insane. So this just means that bullish weeks are way more bullish than bearish weeks are bearish, right? Like way more. Like this is actually crazy. We could map it out. I mean, you can just see it here, right? P2 interval low for this week is at 60. The P1 interval low is for 68. The P1 interval high is at 89. And the P2 interval high is 133. So just look at, the P2 interval low is $60 behind the open price, and the high is $53 behind the opening price. So that's massive, right? It's a massive difference, 23 compared to 50, or 20 compared to 53. We'll look at this one later. That'll be funny. But Solana, let me quick, because it should be somewhere up top. It should be higher. All right, I'm not going to make this more difficult than I need. I'll just click it like this. But regardless, what you have to understand is that, so this was a news pump. Not only that, we have this S&P here. This is a weekly open where we basically rejected from, right? So this is the weekly open. This is still a very good area to put in a weekly P1, right? Very good area. So if, say, this would happen, then you have your weekly P1 here. And that's not a weird place at all. And we also know from the data, 1.28, which means the upside is pretty much 28% higher than the downside is. But going back to the data for Solana, time, select Sol. I'm on the wrong dashboard. Let me go here, because there I can filter for bearish weeks, because then we're going to tie everything together. So once again, we're going to look at when bearish weeks put in their pivots, specifically P1s. Let me just tidy that up a little bit. So basically what I'm showing here is, okay, if the week is bearish, that's what I'm looking at. What are we looking at? When are we going to put in like a weekly high or low? We see if it's bearish, then it's like there's really no edge to be found on Solana at the moment. I mean, look at the drop of Mondays. Mondays, we've seen less and less pivots on Mondays during this entire bull run, right? So this is the last 2 years. And you can see it's just becoming less and less, right? So putting in a pivot on Tuesday is not a weird thing at all. On Wednesday is a little bit less likely. Yeah, it was just on Wednesday. But I mean, if I see this, there is pretty much no edge, right? That's what I would get out of it. Not in terms of time. So for Bitcoin, really big edge. Ethereum also big edge. But in terms of Solana, I mean, if anything, and that's funny because we already did it, but if anything, there's like a slight edge to take out the Monday high. But regardless, we take out the Monday high. This is also not a high probability low, right? We know this. We see this in the data. I mean, yes, it's more or less as high probability as like 40% of Tuesdays have a pivot. But once again, that's no edge, right? 40% of Tuesdays, that's no edge. So that means that if we would reject from here and go down, that is a very logical place to do it from, because you're in this high probability zone to put in a P1. And personally, I think we do need to go a little lower. So then you put everything together. We had this scam pump. So we can basically say, okay, this price action was based on nothing. It was just on a scam pump. And usually you fade that kind of price action. Then you have that scam pump. And now we need to go back to normal, so to say. And it looks like price wants a little lower. And I'm not saying it's going to go completely down. But somewhere here is then where we're looking for a potential bounce. And then we're going to do some other magic. Oh, this is actually was a very nice one for a bounce. So I'm not saying it has to go down, because this is a very nice area, can definitely hold. But we're not out of the woods. And if we're going lower, Then let me check if there is some confluence with some naked daily point of controls. Oh yeah, wow. And if there's confluence, look at that. I was looking for a naked daily point of control, and the naked daily point of control is right here. Right here. See that? Like literally on the line I drew. Right on top of it. So this is a high confluence area because we have this high, March high, SR, plus naked daily point of control. And now we bring it all together. So say we have a bearish week, right? A slight bearish week. We do like this. Then this is a high confluence area within the 80% P2 interval. 80% P2 interval. So that means that if we have a bearish week, we know that 80% of those weeks are going to end somewhere in here. We also know we're in a bull market. This is a very high probability, high confluence level, very big level. So if we're going to look for any place for this downward move to end, this seems like a very good place to do it, right? So you're looking for somewhere in this zone. If you overshoot it, obviously, if there's no confirmation, you just look for a little lower. But this would be an area I would be looking at. Also, why am I looking at that? Because let me teach you one other thing when it comes to TA. This right here was a very important resistance, right? Because this was the part where we just, I would pretty much take it as a zone, to be honest. Like this is really nice because you have to make a daily point of control. But honestly, anywhere here would be good, right? This high time frame, it's better to look at zones rather than trying to pinpoint the exact level. But if you would get here, so this zone is nicely in this area, right? So we know that 80% of weeks will not overshoot this area right here. So this is a very nice support zone in that area in case price goes there this week. So that's where we want to look for a potential bounce. And if you have a very important resistance area like this, so this is a very important resistance area, price, rejects massively off that, consolidates on the rate for pretty much 9 months, and here breaks it, right? Then people say, well, this was the retest. I disagree. This was not the retest. It's too low time frame, right? You have to look at this on, like, the best thing to do is probably just on the weekly candles because it's so far. You see here that there was, very locally retest, but this is not an SR flip. This is not an SR flip. What you want to see with an SR flip, like you cannot look on a super high time frame level on the 4-hour chart or on the 1-hour chart or something to look for an SR flip. What you want to see, let me just get the weekly interval ranges out. What you want to see is a big move away from it, and then price coming back down to test it. And then if price comes back down, because obviously it doesn't have to, but if price comes down, then that's a very high probability area for at least a bounce, right? I'm not saying it has to continue like this, but it very well could, considering we're in a bull market. But then that is something you want to be looking at. So it's not that you see this and you're like, oh, we had the SR flip. No, you want to see big displacements and then price coming back down to test it. If that happens, then that's a proper SR flip. But once final words, that doesn't mean I would be shorting this personally. We're in a bull market, it's all season, and I would be cautious with shorts. However, if price gets here, then I would be very interested in looking for a long. So what I'm going to do is actually set an alert right there, or a little bit before maybe. Crossing, no, interesting long zone. That would be a very nice area. So have this as support. Whoops. That time frame analysis. There we go. Very nice area. Really nice area. Oh, this is actually nice. That is actually nice, because what you can do here, and this is also, one of the reasons why I wouldn't be, after this, I want to look at TRB, finish things off. But here you have the fair value gap, which is being filled now. And if we would look at the fair value gap feature, let's go to the other one. Because this one was put in, yesterday in the evening. So we go to fair value gaps. Look at some data for fair value gaps. So by the way, the conclusion of all of that is basically that it would be Bitcoin downward sloping consolidation. I don't think we're ready to break 100K yet. Ethereum, bullish. I do think we're ready to go up. Solana, I am more on the fence about Solana, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little lower. And I'm gonna switch this to 3%, 2%. Let's do 4%. Why not? So basically, what I'm doing here is saying, okay, I want to look at fair value gaps that are in between 4% and 2% on Solana. And then I should be seeing this one, but I'm not seeing it. How big is this one? 2.3. Let me just remove that field. I'll remove this. $3.12 should be put in yesterday. 4 hour. What am I missing? There it is. Usually it's some setting that doesn't make sense. %0.59%. Doesn't look. Oh, it's the other one. Let me check this one. Because it's already getting filled. All right. Well, it shouldn't update it like that, so I will look into that after stream. That's why it's a beta. But usually I wouldn't want to see, we can just look at the general data, because if you have a fair value gaps in between, 2% and 4%, which this one is, greater than 4%, normally we can select it. Whoops, 2%. So in the last, 6 years, there were 186 of those. Basically, what you can see here right now would be the third candle, I think, because the confirmation is here. And then there's 1, 2, 3. So that's 3 candles. And where we can see that after 3 candles, fair value gaps between 2% and 4% on Solana. 55% of them have a first step, so that's happening right now. And only 2.7% of them have a reversal, and 16% a full fill in the same candle. So what we know is that within this 4-hour candle, at least, only to fill this within this candle, to reverse is here. Close below here is reversal. This is a very low probability. 2.7%. to close it in the current 4-hour candle. And then you go up and you basically see that before the end of today, 11% of these would be reversed. So that's here. %, chance of happening before end of day. So that's not a very high probability of going down that far, right? So this is 11% chance of happening. Once again, normally you can select it, but for some reason now we cannot. I'll look into it, but this is a very low chance of happening. So that's why I'm saying I definitely wouldn't be shorting into this. This kind of fair value gap usually acts as support. It's also the reason why last week I didn't look for lower prices on Bitcoin. I'll make a video about that today, actually. But this usually, if it gets tapped early, acts as support, right? So if anything, this would be an area to look for a long and not for a short. Also, it's the SR flip area here. So not something I would be looking to short. That's what I want to make clear. So the only thing is that if price does go lower and it gets here, then for me, that would be a very interesting place to load up for a long. And I do not think it's a very unrealistic scenario either, where ETH can kind of take over, right? So that's what we're looking at now. So this is just on the high time frame, a wait and see zone, but definitely not a short zone. 11% probabilities is what you're betting at. Right, finally, I want to do one more thing before closing out, and that is looking at TRB because it has such a high interval ratio right there. TRB, let me quickly check first what Bitcoin is doing, just out of curiosity. Yeah, not much. Not much. So still waiting eventually for this zone potentially to be hit. But like I said, downward consolidation seems to be the play. But then to TRB. So once again, what this is saying, this P2 ratio being so high, is that the upward displacement is, let me say it right, 170% bigger than downward displacement for the weeks. I mean, we can see that here right now because, and it's looking at the median value, not the average value. All you have to know for that is that, for example, a move like this doesn't skew the data by a lot, unless it happens all the time. But then it's a valid confirmation. So, for example, if we look at that, if I just draw over this one right here, weekly interval, and let's see where the week started, right there. What the hell is that thing? Oh, all the way there. So if we just take these over, TRB, so again, what this 2.70 means is that there's just an insanely higher probability of if there's a bullish week, it's going to go way higher than various weeks ago. And this is based on quite some data. Like this is based on, I mean, plenty of historical data. So what we are looking at, I mean, this is the last year though, still valid. Normally I would look for 2 years. So this one is 60. This one is 68. 89. And 133. Wow. Look at that. Jeez. This is crazy. So basically what you're looking at is if you're going to have a bullish week, you know with 80% certainty the weekly low is going to be within this interval. And then if you have a bullish week, you're looking at targets all the way up here, right? So you can see the targets are really high because apparently there is just many very big displacement weeks. Whereas if you have a bearish weeks, you see that 80% of the times we have this here as the weekly high. One sec, guys. I need to open it. So basically, if you're in a long right here, then you can safely hold on because you know there's a very high probability of this moving a lot higher. I mean, this is really crazy. Really crazy. You just have, I mean, you can see it as well. The bullish weeks are just insanely bullish. Now I gotta accept the package. So if you're using this, then the higher this is, the more bullish the week is likely to be if the weekly low holds. All right, sorry guys, it was a package I was waiting for. But to wrap up, because we talked enough, Bitcoin consolidation, probably not going to break 100K this week. I'm sorry to say it. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I would like to see it go lower. I do think you're in this downward sloping consolidation right now, which will probably last a little bit longer. And I think we need to shake some people out before we do it. If it were to happen still this week, and I would like to see this happen then tomorrow, preferably, maybe Friday, then this would be the place to do it from and go lower. If not, there's also a possibility we just go down like this. So that's what I'm looking for on Bitcoin, just some consolidation. Let alts do their thing. Ethereum looks bullish. We'll probably see further upside where you're looking for targets within this zone right here. And then Solana, if it goes lower, I think Solana looks weaker, which you can also see. I mean, Sol ETH negative 3.6%. Then this is the zone I'm looking to potentially place along. All right, guys, that's it. That's me boring you long enough with statistics. Thank you for watching. I will be recording a small video for the members now next up. And I will be back with a stream with Tim next week. All right, guys, hope you have an awesome day. Thank you for listening and catch you on the next one. Ciao, ciao.